Welcome to the Worship Server Podcast. It's good to have you guys here, man. We always appreciate you tuning in and jumping in and listening to us talk about worship. As always, my name is Blaze Nelson, and I'm with my co-host Travis Swan. How you doing, Travis?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Good, nice. I always want to throw a middle initial on you, but I haven't yet. We'll see if
Well,
we
my
get
middle
there.
initial is D, which means that my parents named me Travis D.
Nice. That's good. We'll stick with that.
Awkward intro.
Yeah, it's good. Well, we are excited to be here, and man, if you guys get any value out of what we're doing here, we'd appreciate just a comment or a rating on whatever app you're listening on. It just helps the show go up, and it doesn't matter a ton what you say, but we appreciate that. That helps a ton. And just before we get too far into this, we open up every episode like this, but just a disclaimer is that Travis and I are just two guys who are passionate and love worship, love the local church, but we are not pretending or claiming to have all the answers, especially for your local context. I am doing a lot of research about worship right now and just a lot of learning and studying. And I find that I really want specific answers for my use case. And I think that's not going to happen because I think this is just one of those areas that the Lord really wants to work with you on. And so Travis and I are not pretending to have shortcuts there or to have all the answers. We just have been doing this a long time and love talking about it and think, man, what we are doing is really valuable here. So please don't feel like guilty if you don't listen to us at all. That's totally fine. Please don't feel like we're trying to come and say that you're doing it the wrong way. That's not what we're saying at all. Just having a conversation here. So all that housekeeping out of the way, Travis, what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about youth bands. So youth worship bands, and I really don't mean like just the music side of it. There's foundational things with music and youth where you can use music as a tool to shepherd people's hearts. It's like in some ways the music isn't the point, though we want to probably get into the nuts and bolts and things around structure, how do you structure practice, things like that. But really what we want to talk about is why youth bands in church matter probably way more than most of us realize, and just kind of what that looks like, some of our own experiences from that. So maybe just to start off with, Blaze, you and I had a conversation years ago. It's probably over a decade ago. We were at a conference. I remember we were in a big circle of worship leaders, band type people talking about bands. And you asked a question, kind of laid it out, like, how do you get more musicians like in a small church for your band? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah. It was probably a decade ago at this point. We were in a round table, just having conversations about the needs that worship leaders were experiencing in our movement of churches, and some of the issues that we were experiencing. And I don't know if it was me or somebody else, but we were just talking about how to get more volunteers. And you very matter of factly said, "Oh, just get 12-year-olds in your band." And you had a list. You're like, man, they will listen and they'll work hard and they got all the time in the world. And by the time they're 18, they'll be killer musicians and they want to do this stuff. And something in my head clicked, and I went home and immediately got my little brother. I think he was about 12 at the time, and his now wife, got them both in band with me, and they're still serving in our church, and we're kind of in the second wave of those teens. But yeah, there was just something about it that was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense, and I do think these guys have a real heart to jump in. Oh, it's been a really sweet thing for our church. I think God-given thing. I don't know if you felt particularly inspired when you said that, but man, it changed the direction of our worship ministry for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's something I had already been living through and had seen a generation or two sort of come of age and start leading. So when someone asked that question, there's like the immediate where you're looking at how next month can I have a band? That may not be realistic.
yeah.
But if you play the long game, you can build a music ministry that is just so high quality. And so I actually give that advice a lot. So honestly, I probably just said it spur of the moment, like use 12-year-olds, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I meant it. I meant it. Because some years before that, I had already started working on youth bands, and I think that that particular conference, I think I was leading worship at that conference.
Yeah, yep,
Um,
yeah.
and
We were just
part of
talking about
my
it.
band was 18-year-old plus adults who had been through the youth band circuit that I had been leading,
Mm,
you know, and it was sort of my A team, really, you know. So I've just seen the fruit, the long-term fruit of it. Um, so I just am grateful that you've got some now life example that we can talk through. How's that played
yeah,
out? You know, and I want to share some of what I've thought about as well. But really, as we are considering this, you know, the reality is in most churches, you do have your immediate need. Sunday morning, you've usually got a youth group type need as well, depending on how big your church is. Um, but I think that there's a little bit of a misconception in church when it comes to like, particularly like teenagers, but just kids in general in the church. I've been thinking for years about how we treat young people in the church in general. So I'm going to kind of start like high level, like beyond just like music. Like you've got a kid who likes to play guitar. Okay, that's great. Well, let's move past that conversation and move into like how do young people thrive in the church? One of the books on the shelf behind me is actually called Growing Young. The Fuller Institute did this research project where they studied over 250 churches, conducted over 500 interviews. They did a whole bunch of site visits to these churches, and their point was how what are these churches doing that have made generational transfers? Like they're actually like reaching young people. The young people are thriving. And one of the things that they found in the research was over and over again, the churches that were losing their young people, they called it this pattern. They called it the holding pen, where youth ministry and even like Sunday school becomes a place where you keep kids busy, like in the back room or in the
yeah,
basement. You keep them
yeah,
safe, you give them their own space, you keep them entertained until they're old enough to like join real church. And the message that that sends to your youth and your kids, whether you intend it or not, really is you don't really matter yet. The church is going to need you later, but you're not really in that pipeline right now. We're doing real
yeah,
church.
yep,
You guys do, you know, it's sort of like the difference between a real kitchen making real cookies and the play kitchen where you bring your toddler along and, you know, they don't get to play with hot pans and fire and ovens and things like that.
yeah,
Um,
yep,
but eventually they figure out they're not really cooking. In youth group, you can structure it in such a way that they finally figure out they're not actually doing church. And so the churches that thrived, that they studied, they had flipped this completely. And when they were asked to name like the top factors in the success of actually integrating the youth, they said that they just made young people an actual priority, like not a side project, not something kept in a back room, but a actual priority. They used a term, they said keychain access. So a metaphor with that is just simply they hand the key, like the main key of the front door to the church to a youth so they can open it up on their own and get in by themselves. And they're doing that with all of these different ministries. They're handing the keys. And it's enough that it's like, I've actually used some of that terminology with some of our youth where I'm like, hey, I'm actually going to give you the keys to this. And that means you have destructive power over the service. What you choose to do could make or break this for 350 people, you know, on a Sunday morning. And I read that book quite a while ago, and I had already been thinking towards that end. That was a little bit of kind of how I grew up in the church, or I had some of those experiences myself as a youth where I was handed the keys in a way that maybe I didn't really feel totally ready for, but it just kind of blew my mind that an adult would give me that kind of responsibility. You know, where I felt like I was more on the front line of what the church was doing in terms of ministry rather than being sort of subjugated to the back room until I came of age. Right. So that's like the high level. Like music is a subset of this, and it's a tool for the sake of shepherding people and mentoring them, and coaching them, and you know, you could probably have the same conversation about all kinds of different ministries within the church. Music just is the one that we happen to have some skill in.
Have a podcast on.
And yeah, and we have a podcast about it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, my experience in that, we church planted when I was 14. Or I guess I was 12. And so there was a lot of need as I was growing up. And as I was in high school, I started playing in band because we needed a guitar player in band. And I started, when I was in college, we church planted and opened up another campus on the other side of town, and we needed a worship leader on that side of town. And so I church planted and went over there and became the worship leader on that side. So my experience has been just filling in those needs, especially in the small church. And it's like, okay, now we need a website. Now we need um, somebody to whatever, right? All these needs are cropping up, and I'm
Mhm.
the pastor's kid, and then B, available and engaged. And so all of these things were being handed over to me. And it really made me feel like I was important, like I was a part of what was happening. I don't remember I don't remember where this came from. I remember where I heard it was from the Holy Post, but they were saying that if like kids that have adults in church that know their names, who have no business knowing their names. So not a Sunday school
Yeah.
teacher, not the
Yep.
youth group pastor, just a random adult who knows a kid's name. They're like astronomically more likely to stay in church when they
Yes.
graduate high school. And
Totally.
I've had a lot of conversations with other guys that we know, other pastors who are, starting youth ministry or college ministries. And it's like, man, this is from Mike Bunnell. He's a pastor up in Colorado, but he was saying like the whole idea of church is we graduate out of church. We're graduating kids out of church, which sounds similar to what you were saying in that book.
Like youth group,
But
you mean? The whole
yeah,
idea of
yep.
youth group? Yeah.
So you go through Sunday school, you go through youth group, you go through college group, and then you're free. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've finished church. So I do think there's something really critical here of how do we transition youth into functioning members of the church, or how do we just keep them as functioning members of the church, not just when they're adults, but like when they're little too? How do we be a church family and and not just an adult family,
Yeah. Yeah. So that really, I mean, I think that speaks to that whole keychain leadership thing idea from the Fuller study. So the idea that adults in the church hold the real keys to being like real participants in doing church. Um, and I think the idea there is that you can, as the leaders and as the adults, you can hoard the keys and do everything yourself,
Mhm.
right? Um, one thing that I think I can fear is just throwing the keys to a teenager and walking away.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
I hope that isn't what happened to you when you're 14, and there's such a need that you're finding yourself doing all those things in the church. Like that is and can be a good crucible for learning and actually having that keychain access. But I would say that there's a third option, an even better option, and that is hand them a key, but also stay close while they're learning to utilize it and all of its implications. Right. And in the Fuller study, that's really the thing that was um, key for keeping young people and a non-parent. Like you could be a parent of a different kid, but like you said, someone else in the church other than your parents who you respect, who knows your name and is now working with you. That was really kind of the key. And the worship team, even like being part of the Sunday service worship team for a teenager, was one of their correlating factors to kids sticking
Wow.
around for the long
Yeah.
haul, which was really, really cool, I thought. Um, so I think what happens to youth when that happens uh, is there's something that you're explaining to them and teaching them about church just simply with that action. And it's something no Wednesday night youth group talk could teach
Mm,
them,
yeah. Yep.
right? There's something about this community, the church, that is trusting you with something that actually is mission critical. and you're like legitimately part of something God is doing right here, right now, and you're being released into it with trust. And that trust, it's just interesting. I think the stats on that research basically said that young people who are given that kind of responsibility where there's trust, they end up trusting the church in return and sticking around.
Interesting. So there's a
If that makes
transactional
sense.
element to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been thinking about that, as my kids are coming of age now. All three of my kids in the last year are now in a youth band. And I've been doing youth bands for years, kind of thinking in a hypothetical like future, maybe my kids will be into music and that'll be part of their world. And it's been pretty fun to have them part of it. But, it,
Mhm.
it pulls it a little closer to home with me. So I'm not like the distant mentor now. I'm both the mentor and the parent. So that's a whole different dimension. But these are things I've been thinking about for some time. Um, so you brought in your brother. How much younger than you was he at the time? You said he was like 12.
Yeah, he's 4 years younger than I am.
Okay.
No, at the time he's 10 years old. I have a lot of siblings, so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
brother I brought in at the time is 10 years younger, so he's a decade younger. Um, and yeah, it was yeah, that was a good experience just trying to work with them. And I had been, for a youth group, we had a youth band that my dad managed. And so I had worked with others of my siblings in that context before. So it wasn't
Yeah.
totally foreign
Yep.
to me of like having younger people or being a band leader. Um, what I did notice was it was like, man, I really have to step up my game as a worship leader. And I think we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
later, but
Yep.
yeah, it was a real moment of like, okay, this this is getting real fast. So it was a
Yes.
good process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think before we go down that road, I think one thing is you could be listening to this and you could be like in the spot where I was, where you're trying to start something and trying to figure out people to play on Sunday. And maybe we could just speak a little bit into that person right now, because I think this is a longer play than
Hmm.
a short term thing. I do think it can help in the short term. Mm. So you're talking to somebody who is on a church plant in a small church. A worship leader just left. They're filling in. Um, what advice would you give them as they're thinking about starting this journey?
Do I know what kind of musician they are? Are they
Um,
pretty? Are they decent at their own craft, or are they really struggling themselves?
let's
Because
let's do
I would
both.
have different answers.
Por qué no los dos?
Yeah. So if they're pretty decent in and of themselves, and they have a couple of musicians along with them, like let's say they have uh they're a decent guitar player, they've got a keyboardist, and they've got a drummer. My advice then would be look in your church for a kid who's somewhat musical and hand him a bass guitar. Give him some voice lessons or have him, sit in some private lessons or something like that. And then a few weeks or even a month later, pretty quick, with some intentionality, bring them into your rehearsals. And then as soon as they're able to, as like a bass player, all you got to do is get that root note, you know, on the
Yeah.
downbeat.
Yep.
And if they can get to that root note where the chord chart goes from G to E minor and they switch from the G down to the E and they do it on time, or at least time-ish, put them in the band.
Yeah.
And just keep on doing that. Keep on working at that. And I think that over the course of a year or two, you'll probably develop enough skill in those musicians that they'd be able to handle it. If you're looking for a keyboard player, um, usually maybe there's a kid who's taken some piano lessons. They might be able to read some music, but they don't know any theory. You're going to hand them a chord chart and they're going to be like, I don't know what you mean by G and E minor. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, remember when you played this triad, when you're looking at this on the music staff, that's just all you need to do here. And what we're just going to start you off on is we'll just give you a synth pad and play that triad, the G major triad, or even just the fifths, the root and the fifth, and play that for the whole song just to fill it out. Give me a little wall of sound behind the band. And then over the course of months, you give them a song that has a little keyboard like piano hook, and they play those 5 extra notes, and before you know it, a year goes by, and, especially if a kid is like 14 or 15 where they're really coming of age, they can hold their concentration longer. You'll develop a pretty good instrumentalist pretty quick if you keep at it. Right. Now, if you yourself are struggling in your craft, you may not feel like you have the credibility or the wherewithal to actually be able to train anybody else. And that may be true. And I would just say maybe similarly, just try it. Jump in and try it. Look at YouTube videos for yourself. How do you keep rhythm better? Things like that. Um, and continue to try to bring in some youth musicians. In that case, I would probably have a third party, someone who's not in the band, come to your band practices or your sound checks just to listen and help you a little bit, and then be very, very open to their input. Like if they're like, it just feels really disjointed. I'm like, okay, maybe we're not on rhythmically together, or whatever else. But really, you just need to try it. And in both cases, the reality is whoever the youth are that you're going to bring in, they're probably pretty raw,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and just start with a goal of like, get through one song with them. Don't just pile on a bunch of material, just let them get the sense of what is it like to play a song front to back as a band, once. And you don't have to throw them in that week, let them come to practice. So there's probably a lot of like things we could say, but really I'd just say pick a musical kid, maybe one at a time if you're struggling with how much bandwidth you have,
Yeah.
and just put them in and just try it and have a good conversation about it with them. Like, you're going to need to invest. This is going to be hard, and we're going to be evaluating. Like, this isn't a guaranteed, like, oh, now you're in. It kind of depends on how well you do.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think that's good. I think that, man, if you're really trying to struggle and fill out needs, I think go slowly.
Mm-hmm.
um, do the work yourself too. I think we're going to talk about this, but like, make sure that you are up to snuff on what you need to be doing,
Yes.
and be a learner yourself. But I think with that, be honest with who you're working with, because they're looking to you. I think I would be really cautious about making them feel like they're just a commodity, or that you're just trying to use them to fill a need.
Yes. Yeah.
Bring them into, we're going to do this together, and we're trying to work towards this together, and have that relational bandwidth as you're starting this process. And I think that'll go a long way. I think a lot of kids are looking to have a good relationship with an adult or with a 20 something.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you're being honest, if you're not, if you don't know, just say, I don't know. don't, don't pretend like, don't feel like you have to put up a front.
Yes.
And yeah, I think like in my case, I would feel totally confident in, I don't remember where I was at the time, but I would feel totally confident in continuing to lead by myself for a season while I was putting together this band. Um, and so ideally, as a musician, I would encourage you to start working towards that spot where you feel like, man, I can kind of hold this thing down. I can hold the fort down while I'm building up around me. Again, we've talked about it a lot. My brain goes here a lot, but minimal viable product. Am I myself a minimal viable product? Can I show up
Right.
on
Yes.
Sunday and lead by myself, and then I can bring other people? That gives me bandwidth to bring other people around me, and build up slowly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
good.
I think it's a good advice to just be comfortable leading by yourself while you're building a band. I think that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
cool.
really good. So, what is the youngest you'll work with a kid,
Yeah,
or is that variable?
I keep it at 12. Um, we have a couple spots where we really try to bring kids on. One is for like slides or presentation. I don't know what you would call that for. We still use PowerPoint, so
Yeah, we use
we still call them
ProPresenter.
slides
We
for
call it
ProPresenter.
multimedia. Yeah.
For your multimedia operator.
Yes.
Um, that's where I cut my teeth even when I was at our bigger church before we church planted. I was the slides guy. And that's a great spot to really practically bring somebody on. Um, it's pretty doable, but you have to make sure that you have a kid that's really engaged, and be willing to speak into their lives if they need it, because nothing's more distracting than slides being all over the place. So you got to be kind of
Yes,
careful
yeah, totally. Well,
who you
I
hand that
actually
off to.
I agree with you completely. I actually tell I've had a lot of kids run slides, um, including one of my own. And I always tell them, like, you are going to make or break this for the worship leader because if you don't have the words up, it doesn't matter whether he's on the mic and the sound is good and the lights are good. Nobody knows what to sing. It's up to you. I'm always like, put that in their hands, like, put that in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
12-year-old's, mind, like, whoa, I really could mess this up. And when they do mess it up, because they will,
yeah. They will.
um, be constructive, but also say, hey, did you notice because of you, the whole room quit singing? There's a lot riding on this. You can be positive and build them up while still being honest.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yeah.
12, I find 12, if they are kind of type A, more organized, detail oriented, or just particularly gifted, 12 can work.
Okay.
But there's
Interesting.
something that happens, I think, around 14 or 15 where people really kind of come of age where they can hold concentration a bit longer. They can receive like correction without just totally falling apart. Um, I think
You
they
rug
they
pulled
start
me.
really.
12 was the
What?
age you said back in the day. I was trying to give the right
I
answer.
did, yeah. No, and I will. Like my 12-year-old is backline electric guitar player in one of our youth bands, and so uh but he's been taking guitar lessons since he was 3. So there is that. But there is something that happens around 14, 15, and if they've had a couple years in a youth band before that, I don't have a lot of expectations of them for those first couple of years, but 14 or 15, they really start caring about quality, like not just getting through the song. So if I have to make a choice, I tend to focus on high schoolers, probably with the occasional middle schooler who I deem ready, you know, and that really, I don't know, there's just something maybe it's biologically, with their motor skills and things
A
like
little,
that.
little bit more cooking done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your hands are just a little bigger so you can handle the distance on the bass or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Okay, so we're talking about there's like it almost seems like there's two categories here. Where's my hand at? On one hand, we're talking about like your Sunday morning, the adult service, uh, versus like incorporating youth into those bands versus maybe like an entire band of all youth who maybe have more of a youth group type focus. Do you have a distinction on those or priorities on that or ways you like to organize that or think about that?
Yeah. So this has actually been a topic that we've had a lot come up in the last year. My dad's, I still work in the same church as my dad. He we do a parent led youth group, and one of the cool
Yes.
things we do on about youth group is we during the summer months we will go to a park and like give out root beer floats and have like do an outreach, and kids will come up and ask questions to get a root beer float. And so we've been doing that since I was in high school, and just for years and years and years have this ministry going on. So like when I was saying, hey, it'd be cool if we could have like a youth band and they had a specific spot that they could play on Friday, he was like, hey, that's not where we're going. So ours functionally has been mostly youth in band, not necessarily a youth band. We have a group of guys. They're all solid dudes, all really, really great guys, and like for a conference or if we need them, we will pull them together and kind of send them off, but they're not like regularly practicing together. The idea specifically is that they're just kind of growing in their chops separately, and then when we need to, we can put them all together and get a product. That was probably the wrong word there, get a product, but we can have a viable band um if the need should arise. But I think what they do is they just have an acoustic player and a cajon player, and they'll just play for youth band. Um, so that's kind of where we've been at. Um, I think this is what I was going to ask. This is sort of in that same topic. One of the things that we do, and I don't think this is actually a question. One of the on ramps that we have. So our band, we do 2 practices a week when the band is performing, and so we do Tuesday nights, and then we do Saturday nights, and then Sunday morning rehearsal. So I guess technically 3. And one of the reasons that we do that is we try to keep practices really, really tight. So Tuesday is an hour and a half, and 8:30 rolls around and we're gone. We're going home. Um, Saturday is 1 hour, and then Sunday is obviously just until normally like 40 minutes an hour to an hour. And the idea is that on Tuesday, we specifically have that as an open band practice. So if you are a 12-year-old who's interested in coming up and playing, or is interested in a instrument, you can come to Tuesday. Anybody can come to Tuesday practice, and we'll have kind of our mainline band members. We'll have them sit up with them in their spots. We'll work through our set list, and
Hmm.
then at the end of the song, the people will turn to their proteges and say, "Okay, yeah, notice how I did this, or do you see how this I was kind of playing this way?" And so we're really trying to create an environment where we're training other people. I'm not sure. We A couple years ago we did a real push, and I think we brought in 4 or 5 people all at once. Um, I would maybe not do that again, and maybe just kind of limit it to a couple people. Just for
Yeah, that sounds
the
chaotic.
Yeah, it can get a little chaotic. Um, so, we're definitely growing in that process, but that's kind of our onboarding. If you wanna start getting involved in band, come to Tuesday practice, and then Saturday is like, okay, nobody else, only who's playing on Sunday, and we're just gonna really focus and grind on
Okay.
on Saturday and get this
Okay.
done.
Okay. Your bands, your Sunday bands are doing sort of uh double focus each week. That first week or that first practice is going to be more mentoring training of youth, and the second one is more like these are the logistics of what the service is going to look
Yeah.
like
Yep.
minus those youth. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's a really interesting case study because we're doing two very different things, I think, because we don't do that way. And like you said at the very beginning, we're not here to tell everybody like, "Oh, this is the proper way to do it." You know, I can only lean into my lived experience, and I have not done it the way you're doing it. And you've had success, and I've had success doing it different ways.
Yeah. So what do
Yeah,
you
but
guys do,
that's a
or
really
how's
cool idea. Yeah, so we tend to operate like a lot of churches will actually rotate musicians, so you'll get your planning center invite or whatever, however you work that worship server invite. Um, uh, just name
well
dropping.
well done.
Yeah, there you go. Product placement there. And you don't know who your drummer is going to be any given week. They'll just like
Mm,
keep the same worship leader or something like that. And then the band will sort of rotate in and out. A lot of churches operate that way. And they'll even operate like, so everybody's on in-ears and they have kind of a music director type person who's directing each musician, and they might actually talk to them in their in-ears, something the congregation can't hear, but they'll be like, okay, all right, and the bridge in 3, 2, go
so
now,
I tried
you
that
know.
I tried that once, maybe 4 months ago on one of our, teen drummers, and Buddy looked like he had just heard the voice of God. He was like give give no heads
Who's
up. It was
talking
very
to me?
funny. Yeah.
God.
Before you do that,
um
just give a little heads up.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of churches do it that way. In high school, the band or the church that I was part of, I was in the band and they did it that way. So I never knew who I was going to play with.
Okay.
Um, and I rotated on both bass and guitar, and some vocals. And
Yeah.
I would just sort of, we didn't have planning center back then. So I'd just get a calendar thing print out like, oh, this day I'm supposed to show up. And I will find out what my songs are that night. And I will find out who the band members are that night. Right. And
Well,
then the
yeah.
worship pastor was always the same person, no matter what. So a lot of churches operate that way. There's some advantages to that because you're able to rotate in people who would be, maybe less consistent. Maybe you have more opportunities for musicians. Um, But I think the drawbacks to me outweigh all of that, the positives. I prefer creating bands that stick together rather than rotating musicians in and out, because when the same 5 or 6 people play together every single week, I think they learn from each other. The drummer starts to feel, how the bass player thinks, and the vocalists are trusting the dynamic arcs, that the bands start
Yeah.
building. And um, that chemistry, I think, only really can develop through that consistency. What happens, in my opinion, again, I'm not trying to critique too much, but because rotating musicians in and out can work. But what tends to happen through my experience that I've experienced is every week in that case sounds a little bit more like every song is an improv rather than a sort of put together product. And I think if your goal is a band that sounds tight and plays with a real musical sensitivity, I think you need to keep them together and let them become a unit, right? And that's like a weekly rehearsal type of thing where they're a unit together and you're not rotating a whole bunch of people in and out.
Well, and it
So
makes sense
we
because
operate that way.
you have like a survival mode of like, okay, I'm going to get through the song. Here's the basic chords. I have my little fills or whatever that I'm going to do. And when you're in survival mode, you're not like necessarily practicing creativity. And so I've heard it also said that when you get that, every song starts kind of sounding the same
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're just kind of in survival mode, and your survival mode is going to sound fairly basic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've experienced this. When you change out one team member in a band, I mean, imagine you two and they swap out the edge for, someone else. Like
Worship guitarist.
random worship guitarists who learned
Yeah.
their dot 8 delays and their shimmery reverbs from the edge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but just imagine that you rotate musicians in and out and you change the whole like feel of the band. And I've just experienced that. That's just how that tends to go. So with youth musicians, I've taken that same principle, and instead of rotating them into adult bands, of which I do eventually, usually I will rotate them into adult bands, but it's more like give them a permanent position on an adult band. We'll actually run youth bands. So we'll
Okay.
pick a practice day every single week with probably no Sunday morning set list in mind for them to play, but just with this vague idea that at some point when they become good enough, we'll give them some rotations on a Sunday morning as a whole band after
Okay.
they,
Interesting.
become an entity. So currently we run from 9 to noon every single Saturday morning with our current youth band.
Mhm.
That day has shifted around depending on schedules, and there have been times where we've run 2 or even 3 youth bands at one time, like not like at the same time during the day, but like different days of the week, depending on who's around that can actually teach and mentor. Um, I don't personally commit to more than one youth band at a time. So if there are other ones, we usually have someone else in the church, another musician or worship leader who's working with them. And I might pop into their rehearsal, but I don't tend to just lead them. So we've had entire youth bands that I almost had nothing to do with. But our church is large enough that we have people to kind of pull from that are envisioned to make that happen. But currently we just have one. And if I do have two, it typically divides out. So there's one from the middle schoolers and one from the high schoolers.
Okay.
But that isn't always the case. So currently we have a couple of middle schoolers in the band, as well as some high schoolers and one high school senior even. Um, so they get the sense of what it's like to be with the same people every single week. So that's kind of how we run. And then I tell them on day one, our goal for you guys is that your band will lead worship as soon as you've applied yourself enough that you have 5 or 6 songs that we deem good enough quality for Sunday morning. And then we'll take, there's usually like 4 fifth week Sundays in a year, and we'll throw a youth band at one of those days.
Okay. Yeah.
But if the band gets good enough, like our current youth band is pretty awesome, actually. I gave up one of my band rotations this month, just to allow them to play and have the whole service instead of my adult
Mhm.
band.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, so we'll structure that way. And then eventually what ends up happening is, not every kid sticks with it, so the bands don't tend to stay together for more than a year or two, and kids graduate out and things like that. But there will be needs that arise in the adult bands, and the better youth musicians will transition into an adult band as a
Okay,
regular
interesting.
rotating member, um, probably as soon as they're good enough to do that.
Okay.
And then they
So it's
just
it's
commit
kind of
and they
like
just become part of that band.
it's a proving ground almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, for us, when when we got that, like, influx of people, however many it was, what we did at the time was my brother had just graduated high school and was needing to do worship less time, or he needed a little bit more free time. So I let him take the band that we were kind of forming alongside with everybody else and spin that off. And so now we have two bands. One is kind of that first crop of guys, and then the original band. And I just took some of the guys that were in there and filled in what we needed. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I think I feel like we've been doing it a lot, yeah, like almost 10 years, but still don't have kind of the like generational um view of it that you've had that experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
all right, so what are some of the things that you'd be careful with? I think as I was thinking about it, and I alluded to this, and maybe I'll start and toss it back to you, but I realized for me, when I started bringing in youth musicians, it really necessitated me stepping up as a worship leader. And so when we started training people, I started putting out set lists way farther out in advance. Um, I started making sure that we really had resources that were available for people. Do you remember the old Paul Baloche stuff? Did you see the lead worship series back in the day?
Yep.
Yeah, so like having that available for people to go view, and um just really trying to make sure that A, I was really on top of my game, but B, I was providing resources so that people could succeed. And what's happened
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
the dynamic that we've had, and this, I think this is important with youth band, or with youths in band, and with everybody, is to have clear expectations for them. And so, like for our bands, and I'm sure with yours, we expect them to be professional about their preparation. We expect them to be professional about their time management. We expect them to be professional about, like, we are giving them an opportunity to come and do this thing together. And I have a huge responsibility in making sure that they have all the resources to succeed. The way I've worded this in my head is I have to give them every possible opportunity to succeed. That's my job.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they have the responsibility to take every possible opportunity to succeed and to succeed. Um, so just, yeah, I think for me, it's like, okay, I can't fly by the seat of my pants anymore. Like, this has to be, I have to really step up my game,
Yes.
for the sake of these guys. For, like, as they're coming in, I really have to like make sure that they can succeed, or, or this might leave a bad taste in their mouth for a very, very long time. That
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not to put too much emphasis on it, but
It it
some
it
bad
matters. They're gonna
consequences.
remember. They're
Yeah,
gonna remember. Your influence is really important.
yeah. So yeah, what are you thinking about when you're bringing these guys on? Your influence, how you're discipling them, maybe beyond just the music.
Yes.
What kind of steps are you
Totally.
taking there?
First of all, I remember being the 14-year-old kid who stepped
Hmm.
into a situation and was handed, the keys, basically. I've had that happen multiple occasions, but the one that really sticks out to me was it was a Young Life group, and I jumped in I was about 14. I went to the first one. There was a lady leading worship for it that, I met that night, and I was like, "Hey, I'm learning how to play guitar," and at that point, I was like, "I know how to play G, and I know how to play D, and, E minor." And she's like, "Really? Bring your guitar next week. You can play along with me." And it was just like one of those,
Mm.
overhead projector, chords written on it, sit on a
Yeah.
stool next to the screen, looking at the screen along with everybody else who's singing along. And there are probably like 40 kids in the room, something like that. Uh, so I brought my guitar the next week and she's like, okay, well, here's the songs. And we just I got there just a little bit early and, there'd be songs I don't know that chord. She's like, that's okay. Just don't play that. Don't play there. Just pretend like you're strumming. Just,
Yeah.
mute the strings and then get to the next chord and then just play along. And then a couple of weeks later, she's like, okay, I'm going to have you lead now without me up here. And I led every Monday night for the next couple of years, and we would do like worship and prayer. So I was also facilitating prayer requests and, we would spend like 40 minutes singing and praying for one another in this living room, basically is what this amounted to with just me on an acoustic guitar. Um, and what she did for me, Judy was her name. I was actually able to reconnect with her and her husband just a couple of years ago. And I just thanked them. Like, you have no idea what you did for me, how important that was, that you opened up your home to all of us kids, but you also put me in this space where I saw something bigger than basically like what was around me in the culture that was trying to disciple me. And I caught it.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So if you think about it, every single kid is being discipled by something. Probably an algorithm, their phone, social media. There's so many things they're encountering right now. They're 14, their body's changing, their desires are changing. They've got school, challenges, like their brain is being rewired. Um, Stuff at home is probably really hard. There's a whole culture screaming at them that, their identity is something other than what God says who they are.
Yeah.
Right. And so my question for anyone who's endeavoring to mentor them in any capacity, whether it's music or something else, is what you're offering stronger and bigger and more compelling than what's forming them, every other hour of the week? I want to level it up. This is
Yeah.
not just about youth in church. It's not a side project. It's not just music. Um, there's a book that John Tyson wrote called Beautiful Resistance that I thought was really, really good. But he tells a story about Dietrich Bonhoeffer in 1933. And Bonhoeffer's running this seminary. It's a discipleship program. And his colleagues are critiquing him for basically being too intense, like too demanding. And he takes one of these guys that's critiquing him. He rows him across a lake and walks him up this hill. And from the hill, they look across and they can see the German military airfield where there's like fighter planes and soldiers drilling around, and this whole entire generation of Nazis being shaped for what they're about to go do. And Bonhoeffer like pulls his colleague in and he says, what we're doing down the hill and across the lake in our seminary has to be stronger than what they're doing at that army base. Right. And so John Tyson in the book, he calls it, this is a beautiful resistance. Your discipleship in the church has to be stronger than the cultural formation.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And so we may not be fighting literal Nazism. Maybe we are. I don't know. The world is pretty crazy right now. But what's coming at these guys as 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds is relentless. The culture is screaming at men saying your masculinity is irrelevant or it's toxic. Right. Women, your identity is found in your looks and how appealing you can be and how manipulative you can be or whatever else. There's 1,000 million sources of identity and they're all shallow and they're temporary. And if we're going to step it up, we got to step it up to something that's real. We're going to give you guys responsibility. We're going to give you guys real community and real church. This is God's plan A for you and for all of his people. And we're going to form you. And so I'm actually going to take the time to consider how to do that as I hand you a bass guitar, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, I just went on a rant. I just feel really passionate about this because I've seen so many churches relegate the kids to the back room or the basement and say, play church until you're ready. And
Yeah.
it just
Yep.
totally fails. You cannot outcompete the world that way.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's something like give them a chord chart and make sure the chord chart's in the right key, do it. You better not show up with a chord chart in the wrong key. They get the wrong message. You don't actually care about this. You're doing it halfway, so I can do it halfway too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all super good. It's hard to speak into that, but I think it is interesting because I my wife was a teacher before she became a mom, and now she's just teaching full time. Um, but she, she would go to trainings, and one of the trainings she went to, the guy that was speaking was saying they did a study on kids of who the most influential people in their lives were, who the most influential adults, and the only common denominator was that the adult was present.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It didn't matter who
Totally.
it was, it didn't matter what they were doing, it just mattered that they were present. And so I think to be present for these guys, to be doing something with them. There's just something about doing music together. It's interesting that you had that experience of somebody coming alongside you and like giving you a guitar and helping you. I have a very similar experience. You would know his name. I don't know how he's doing. I don't anyway, but
The
he
name
came
just popped in my
alongside
head. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
and he cared. He
Yeah.
showed me a
Yep.
couple chords and stood with me and did it the first couple weeks, and then he started playing bass because that's what he wanted to do. But that man changed my life. And I have great parents who love the Lord, who are very present, and were very present in my life. And
Yes. Yeah.
um, that guy made a huge impact on me. Just by being willing to show me an easier way to play G, C, and D together.
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and um, yeah, the opportunity that we have here is massive. Um, so going practical, how do so for us, one of the things we do on Tuesdays, because we have two practices, we have a little bit more bandwidth to be able to do stuff like this. But we do highs and lows every week. We do sharing a quiet time thought, and then we read through Psalms together. And then I might sometimes give just a envisioning statement before we start playing, and then we pray together. Um, but one of the goals I'm wanting to do is, okay, we're doing this really practical thing with these guys. We're making music together, which is super cool. We're like doing art together. We're like, I depend on this 16-year-old just not to like, we're doing it together. We're sounding good together. And if this 16-year-old isn't doing his job, we're gonna we're gonna crash and burn. And it helps that all those guys are amazing instrumentalists, and like our pianist just won he's the best pianist in the state, in the city currently. So that's awesome. Um, but I'm doing something with these guys, but then also I'm letting them see life. I'm letting them see real life. So I'm letting them see my highs and lows. I'm letting them see how I'm reading the word. I'm letting them see what I'm learning in the word. I'm letting them see other guys, other adults in their lives. And what I love about our band is that when we do band parties, that's another one. Do band parties with your team semi regularly. We don't do them enough. We have the 60-year-olds group together. We have me and my wife in our 30s, and then we have some 20-year-olds, and then we have tons of teens. And we all come together and we do Christmas parties together, and we do barbecues and stuff. And there's just something beautiful about that picture of the church of like, this is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
a one-dimensional thing. This is not a one generational thing. This is something that we're all coming together. And I need the 60-year-olds to be speaking into my life. I need the 20-year-olds
Yes.
in my life. And how much more do and I need the 15 and 16-year-olds. And how much more do they need all of our love and care as well, not
Hmm.
just to sound good on this Sunday, but beyond. Like, man, what would this look like if they stuck around after college or after high school? What would this look like
Yes.
if um, they started teaching other people? And that's one of the things that I love that I haven't done. But when young families want their kids to start learning guitars, they start tapping the teens and saying, "Hey, come teach my kid guitar." And I know
Yep.
my guitarist
Yep.
is currently giving lessons to other kids in the church. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. We've definitely done that. Yeah. So what you're talking about is intentionality with more than just, G, C, D, E minor. I love the emphasis on the multi-generational there. I think that's really good. And then presence. I think the word presence is one of the key things I got out of that. And I definitely agree with you on that. We can teach youth by sending them a worksheet or, here's a YouTube link, emailed, whatever. But by being in the room with them, present, like present for the whole rehearsal, uh, I try to do that with our youth bands. I don't always have the full amount of time to be able to do that. That we run into logistics sometimes, but more often than not, being present is something I'm able to do. An active presence, not like one that's sitting in the corner on your phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like the dynamics of a song are off or the rhythm's off or something like that. I'm like, hold on, let's talk about this. Let's try it again. I'm actively
That's
coaching
good.
them and being present
Yeah.
um, the whole time. And it actually takes a lot of time. And there have been seasons where uh, I have not done youth bands just simply because my work world doesn't allow for it time wise, and the current youth band we have going right now, there were a couple of years before them where I just didn't have the bandwidth for it, and we did a little bit more of your methodology in the meantime, where we just pulled some of the more advanced musical youth into adult bands over those couple of years where we didn't do youth band. Um, but starting it back up has proved to be quite fruitful. And then it does happen on Saturday mornings. I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I got to go do youth band again. 9 to noon. Here I go. um, but it's fun. It's fun. It's good. We will do. We'll sit down and get serious. Bring in some scripture. Talk about how everybody's doing. A lot of times, I try to keep the first part of the youth band kind of a little bit more low key and fun. Like we'll do some setup. We'll do some sound check. Play through some songs. Um, and I don't tend to get to those more serious things until about halfway through practice. I've kind of landed on that. I've done it differently over the years, many different ways. But about halfway through practice, I'm like, all right, everybody's warmed up, everybody's in. We'll take a little break, we'll get everybody back together. We'll sit on the couches in the side of the room, and and then we'll actually get down and into the nitty gritty and talk for 30 minutes about, you know, either how everybody's doing or what we're thinking about. Usually, for me, I tend to be kind of one track minded, so I will usually have the goal of whatever it is that we're trying to achieve together, and everything will revolve around that. The teaching topic, the scripture passage we're in, the how are you doing life wise? That's how this connects to this.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. That's
that
cool.
just tends to be how I am. I'm not necessarily the type of person who will, when you're having an emotional moment, sit down and just listen to you and hold your hand and cry with you. Um, Not necessarily my personality. So, but there's a lot of intentionality with that in the midst of those rehearsals. So we'll definitely do that. In youth band more than the adult bands. Adult bands, I'll tend to do it more at the beginning, like after sound check, but before we actually like get into the nitty gritty of, you know, the music.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I like that. Just having a long extended time together and intentionally doing things together.
Yeah. Play 3 or 4
That's
songs
really
even.
sweet. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
One of the things when we have somebody new comes to band, um, I will have them step up and we always do How He Loves because it's 4 chords over and over again. And I take away music stands and I say, okay, it's C, A minor, F, G. I hope. I think that's right. Yeah, it is. And
Yeah. If you're going to
play
do it
that
really high, I think I lower it.
and play that over and over again and don't not play that. And then we'll do that. And so we'll have our normal band play and the new pianist or the new guitarist just strum along and just play that over and over again. And then at the end, I'm like, hey, look, you just played your first song on stage and you memorized it. Easy
Yeah.
peasy, good to go.
Yep.
You're on your way.
So
So
you've built
I
them up.
think, yeah, give easy wins. I think don't throw them with the most complicated song right out the
Yeah.
gate, but start
Yep.
real simple. I went through and tagged easy to learn songs, and so you can click on that tag on the worship server, and it like pulls up the 15 songs that are really easy to learn. And it's like just give them resources, give them opportunity to keep plugging, and
Yes.
it helps. Do you have other of your worship leaders jump in and help with them, help with the teens?
Sometimes. Yeah. Currently my father-in-law was helping lead worship on Sunday mornings. Had kind of an injury with his neck that was making him not be able to stand up and lead worship. Um, and he really wanted to work. He actually teaches guitar to a lot
Oh,
of
nice.
youth in our city professionally, and a lot of his students are in our bands. Um,
Oh, cool.
so he
Yeah.
volunteered to jump in and help, which has been really great to have him present. Um, Especially since some of his guitar students are actually in the band, and I'm like, "Hey, we're going to learn this new song. Here's your guitar teacher right here. Like, you guys can
Yeah.
work on this another time, not right now."
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's
Yeah.
great.
Um, Maybe thinking of just a few like logistical things. Um, there's a lot of musical things we could talk about, but we talked about I tend to do bands rather than rotations. Um, I tend to think about 14 or 15 is where kids really come of age and hold their concentration better, though I will work with 12-year-olds if they're ready. Um, Maybe a few more just like practical things related to that. I I mandate that depending on their skill level, there comes a point where I'm like, I don't think you guys need this, but I think that all band members need private lessons. So I will start them off and even sit down with parents and say, I am not a music teacher. Our goal for band rehearsal is not to teach the basics. I
Yeah. That's good.
cannot spend rehearsal time showing the guitarist where to put their fingers or teaching the drummer like basic beat patterns because the whole thing stalls up. Everybody else is sitting around waiting for it. So I'd have a prerequisite to if you're going to be in the band, you need to be in private lessons. At a certain point, I will exempt you from that if you are able to be teaching yourself and you've developed enough skill.
That's good.
So just logistically, I think that is pretty important, especially for your drummers because they're the backbone of the band. If they can't hold a steady tempo, many 12-year-olds can't do that. Get them on a click, get them practicing with a click on a regular basis, instruct them in dynamics, but get them in lessons because nothing else in the band is going to feel right until the drummer is able to hold a beat together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. That's good.
Um, and I will do auditions ish, but also I understand that a 12-year-old probably is going to just improve a lot over the time of being in band. So I don't worry too much about where they're at coming in because as long as they're in lessons, they're going to improve. There have been a few moments where we've had a vocalist and like eventually I was like, I just don't think you're ever going to sing on pitch enough to be a lead vocalist in a band. You probably would be better served doing something else in the church. Those are hard conversations to have, but um, mostly I'll just let kids in and they'll even self-select out when they finally realize this isn't their thing.
Yeah.
But I've
That's good.
started whole youth bands with a drummer who had never been on a drum kit until day one of the youth band.
Yeah.
Eventually it works. You just have to tailor it to them, but recognize you're probably going to be catering to the least common denominator in those moments.
Yeah.
But private lessons, they got to be in private lessons. And then I also mandate that they have to practice at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. If they want to do more than that, that's great, but that's mandated. And I will
Yeah.
even
That's
check in
good.
with parents sometimes on that, making sure that they're actually doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and then I think also I kind of have an expectation of them self-selecting in or out, meaning that I'm not going to beg anybody to play. And if it's pretty obvious that the kid doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to be there, maybe it's just their parents' thing pushing them into it. Like I'll
Yeah.
give them a shot, but I basically will say, hey, if you don't want to be here, it's wasting both of our time. This is for the sake of the church. It's for the sake of you guys blessing the church with what you're bringing. And it's obvious you don't want to do that. Maybe that means you want to do something else. That's fine. Um, but this is just not going to be our thing. It's wasting my time and yours. So I will actually sit them all down on day one, like the very first band practice, all new musicians or mostly new musicians. And I walk them through a whole list of expectations. But one of those expectations is uh, if you choose not to practice, and you show up not knowing what I've asked you to know, whatever that is. Maybe one week I'm like, we're not going to use chord charts next week. I think you guys are in a place where you'll have them all memorized by next week. And then they show up and they don't know. I might give them a little grace for a week or two, but eventually it'll become obvious. They're just simply not doing the work. I will pull them aside and just say, hey, it's obvious you're not interested in this. And I'll send them home right in the middle of practice. You're not interested in this. I'll give you 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we'll have a conversation. And you can come back and let me know whether or not you're going to do the work. But it's obvious you don't want to. And they'll at that point, some of them will give excuses like, well, I had homework, or, I'm doing this thing, or we had to travel, or whatever else. And I'm like, those are
Okay.
the things you're choosing.
Yeah.
I care.
Yeah.
I care, but you choose what you choose. And everybody, if you're going to do this, you're going to need to somehow organize your life in such a way, and a 12-year-old can manage to do it with their parents' help, if they care, to actually get this done. So there have been kids that show up and at some point they have proven that they're not doing the work, and I have them put their instrument in a case and go downstairs and call their parents to take them home. So I just kind of make it clear from day one, like, this is going to waste all of our time if you're not interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things I've struggled with, and we're in conversations right now, is just to really set clear expectations, not just with the teens, but with their parents as well, so that everybody knows, everybody's on the same page. Of
Yep.
my expectation is that I'm going to treat you like an adult, and
Yes.
the expectation is that you're going to respond like an adult and do the work that you need to do to make this thing happen. And if you want to take a break, if you want to not be a part, that's totally fine. I'm not going to force you here. I love Mike Tomlin's quote. He used to be the coach of the Steelers, as of last season, but he always says we want volunteers, not hostages. And so it's like,
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I'm not looking to hold you hostage. If this is something you want to do, that's great. If not, then um yeah, let's not pretend. And that's fine. Go and be
Right.
blessed,
Yeah.
and do something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. It's just not going to be good for any of us if you keep going.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Right. So again, we're not running a music program. This isn't like equivalent to, you're doing a center for troubled teens or whatever. And it's just really great that they got in the door.
Yeah.
That's not really what we're doing.
We've
Yeah, go
definitely
ahead.
had moments where we've had that heart of like, oh yeah, we're trying to reach out to this teen. I mean, there's still strong expectations on like, okay, got to keep up. You got to do your thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in flux on a lot of this, on just trying to figure out how to move forward and how to do better. There's been some friction points that we've experienced, and like, okay, how do I set clean expectations? How do I improve to help make this thing run smoother? I think is what we're talking about. And so cleaner
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
expectations. I do like the mandated practice, especially for young kids. I think it's hard to like, y- I'm 30 and work a full-time job and do all kinds of stuff. So I often sit down with a guitar after work and doodle for 30 minutes or whatever, but I'm not tracking it. So it's, try to figure out that balance of, do I only call people into what I'm able to produce and like prove that I'm doing myself, or is there, I definitely did that when I was a teen. Um, so, just trying to figure out all those dynamics on how to communicate all that effectively and in a
Yeah.
reasonable way.
Yeah.
Um, Even just the
Well,
interaction with
I'll just
sports.
I'll just be honest about it. Like, guys, you will get to a point on your instrument where you'll be able to pull off a service without doing the 30 minutes of work a day, And in the end, I'm not interested in you becoming a Pharisee about 30 minutes a day. I'm interested in you showing up prepared enough that you're not dragging everybody else down, and actually you're contributing to excellence instead. That's what I'm interested in. And if that means 15 minutes a day or 2 hours a day, you figure it out. We're just using this as a baseline while you're still young and trying to figure this out.
Yeah. And I want to be conscious of time here. I think we're coming to an end here pretty quick, but um, there is an element where I think it takes a personality to be willing to wade into some of that, and I think both of us are jack of all trades kind of guys.
Yes,
Um,
that's true.
and so, yeah, I don't know if if that's a necessary factor for all of this. Like I know with our drummer last time he was in lessons and I sat down at the drums kit and I'm not like the best drummer in the world, but I like figured out a basic groove for the song and said, okay, do this. And then had him sit down, but it's not like, you know what I mean? I'm wired that way a little bit. Do you think that's a
Yes.
necessary component to this or how do you, I don't know so you're managing like all these different parts and all these different band members. You're new to this. This is your first time. Any thoughts on kind of in that direction of you're not as anal about every little thing, every little piece?
I mean, obviously, I would think that whoever is going to be mentoring these kids towards music should be a musician themselves. You know, it's probably possible to, as a leader in the church, you know, you're like, I'm going to start youth bands. I know nothing about music, but we're just going to try.
Yeah,
It- It's probably possible to get something done there with a lot of prayer and work. Um, but I do think that there's a little bit of a prerequisite if you want to do this well you're a musician leading. You actually do think about music and you understand, you know, keys and chord charts and harmonies and beats and dynamics. You know, you need to have those you need to comprehend all of that. You may not
yeah,
need to be an expert per se, but it's going to help.
yeah, for sure.
You know,
How do
I'm
you work towards that?
oh man, we need to do a whole podcast episode just simply on the logistics and nuts and bolts of music
Yeah,
because
there
I
you go.
could extend that for another 45 minutes to give you that answer to that. But I don't know that that's necessarily what we should be doing here today.
That's good.
Yeah. Uh, can I bring something up though that I think has been my number one challenge with youth bands?
Please.
Parents.
Mm,
Um, there have been tensions with parents over the years because if a parent is sort of halfway invested in church, like they church is kind of a thing they do on the side, like Jesus is in their back pocket, you know. They may see the opportunity with a youth band, like maybe their kid hears an announcement at youth group or, you know, something like that. And they're like, man, I want my kid in that. And I would be fine with their youth being involved. But I would also probably desire to have a conversation with them. Because more often than not, they kind of will see it as, oh, the church has a music program and they're going to train my child to be a musician. You know, and I'm like, no, we're going to train
yeah,
your child to be on the front line of doing ministry as a missionary to the culture. You know, so that I want to make it clear what we're actually doing here. You know, so some part of that conversation is having a conversation with them about, no, I'm not teaching them music. You need to have them in lessons. Right. But one of the main things that happens is, I think in today's world, especially, whether they're homeschooled or in public school or some sort of charter school or whatever, homeschool enrichment, uh, things press on our schedules. And our current world is selling parents opportunities, whether it's sports or theater or academics, um, that just simply take a lot of time. There's a lot of extracurricular activities. And one of the things I want to make sure from the start with parents is to help them understand if their kid goes out for like a high school sport, let's just say a football team, it's pretty likely at a competitive level that their coach will not allow them to do other extracurricular activities.
yeah,
Right. And so I don't
yep,
think it's unreasonable when we're considering how important the church is and how important it is to cultivate a lifelong love for serving in the church with youth. It's more important than football. I'm not saying football is not important or you shouldn't do that or I don't want to knock sports. Could be another a whole bunch of other extracurricular activities, academics. I will talk to those parents and say, think of me like that coach. I want to make sure that your youth has enough time because the game we're playing, in my opinion, and I think the Bible teaches this, has eternal stakes.
yep, yep.
and they'll be competing with all of these other things and all these other opportunities. And some of them are pretty legit. Like they've got their academic thing that they're touring around for, robotics club or something, because they've got a propensity towards that. And I'll have that conversation with those parents of, hey, this is what we think is reasonable for how much time investment these kids can have. And if they're going to be regularly missing practices and regularly not being able to work on their instrument, it may be that this is not their thing in the church. And I think that's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So commit to one or the other. You can do your sport or you can do youth band. Maybe there's a seasonal conversation that we have, there's obviously uh, exceptions to all of this.
Yeah.
But
That's
there
where
are a
we're all
lot of
right in the middle.
parents who will sit down and be like, nope, my kid needs to do their soccer game, and they have this extracurricular activity that whatever it is, art club, and they've got 5 other things that they're doing. Like, when are they going to practice? Oh, they have a slot from 5 to 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? When are they done with homework at night? Oh, about midnight. Well, it's no wonder they fall asleep at band practice and are useless to us.
Yeah. Yep. That's good.
So there's just a lot of things you have to do with just negotiating with parents. Some parents are all in. They're like, man, this is everything our kid wants to do.
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, as I said, we're right in the middle of all figuring all that out and trying to communicate that well. I think one thought that I had too, just as we're closing down here, just really watch the heart of these kids, and just be a watchful guardian on those
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
It's really easy for pride to seep in when you're on stage and there's lights pointed at you and people are listening to you.
Yes.
It's really easy to get proudful in your music ability, to start drawing value in what you bring to the church on a Sunday morning on your instrument. It's really easy for gossip to seep in. It's really easy to look down on other people. It's really easy to not engage with the least of these in the congregation because they'll scuff up your guitar or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
that, and
Right.
that's true for us. That's true for adults. That's true for everybody on stage. But man, how much more for these kids that are in all this transition. So just as a worship leader who's trying to bring youth on and trying to manage this well, just really watch out for their hearts and hold a really high standard on, like, no gossip and don't look down on other people and think well of others and love 100% of the church. All these things that we've been talking about, hold them to that standard and they'll thank you for it. But I
Yeah.
really believe.
Yeah.
And just
Totally.
to keep them in mind, I I'm not gonna read the quote again, but, I'm reading the book Worship Matters by Bob Coughlin, and he says in it, basically, it's easy for churches to have worship become a means to an end, and God is the end. God's the end that we're seeking, and to really keep that at the forefront of these kids' minds, give them a really good theology of what worship is and what we're doing on church,
Yes.
and yeah, the goal is to make lifelong worshipers, and whether they stay at your church or go somewhere else, man, and not necessarily musicians, but lifelong worshipers of our Father. I,
Yeah.
th- I think
Yeah.
I think that's the aim.
Yeah. And don't I would just give this as like a final exhortation. When I sit down a new youth band, whether it's 12-year-olds or 15-year-olds or 17-year-olds, I let them know I'm going to treat them like 40-year-olds. Like, my 40-year-old bassist makes the time in his busy schedule to practice his bass because he's opted in. He sees this as the most important thing he could be doing. And I'll look at them and say, you know what? The Bible says, where Paul says to Timothy, don't let others look down on you because you're young,
Mm,
but instead set an example. And so I think I can actually hold you to a higher standard and treat you like an adult.
yeah,
I usually give some sort of pithy statement, dad statement about how adolescence is just a modern, American construct. They'd probably, if they lived 200 years ago, be considered adults already and, maybe even on their way to having their first kid or whatever. But there are so many moments in scripture. Like, I think about the calling of Jeremiah in the beginning of the book of Jeremiah where he says, God, I don't know how to speak. I'm too young, right? But then it says, but God said to him, don't say I'm too young. He says, you have to go to everyone I send to you, and you're going to speak and say whatever it is I command you. And don't be afraid of them because I'm with you and I'm going to rescue you. You know, like, guys, I believe you're filled with the Holy Spirit and that God is calling you not as a side project, but as the church right now and the church who's going to carry this thing forward when I've aged out. And I want to hand that over to you because I believe God is handing it over to you. And in 20 years, you're going to be leading this church. So I want you to take it seriously because I'm taking it seriously because I think there's a lot at stake here.
Yep.
And so
Yep,
we're going
that's
to
good.
build something real. And some of that looks like, you know, teaching you the difference between a dynamic of 3 versus a dynamic of 9 on a song and how to lock in a groove with that. And that's all just kind of a mechanism to teaching them to trust in the Lord, you know, that this is something that is going to bless the church and this is going to be the future of the church. And I'll just tell them to their face as 12-year-olds, I think some of you that I'm looking at right now in 20 years may be leading churches. And so I'm here committed to you to help form you into that.
Yeah, that's good.
And we'll do a lot of fun music on the side of it.
Yep. Yeah. Amen. And I mean, if you look at worship music, it's forming us. Worship. That's what we're doing all the time anyway with worship music. The goal should be spiritual formation in people, and this is just
Yes.
an outflowing of that dynamic, you know. So the edification of the church.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, maybe that's a good spot to close this out. Anything you've been reading in the Word?
Oh man, I feel like I've been all over the place. Yeah. Most recently, as reading through Psalm 82 and kind of just trying to study out what on earth the psalmist is talking about there. I mean, it's God talking to somebody. You know, there's this like heavenly council or divine council. God is in this divine council. And, you know, just intellectually sitting there trying to figure out who are these people? Are these angels? Are these, what are they? But he's called them to something and they have been unfaithful in it. And he's rebuking them and demoting them. And so just even after trying to sort things out with who are these people, I don't know. There's just a higher implication there with it of, man, faithfulness is so important to God, you know, and he cares about what you're doing with your life, you know, and he's called us to something that is high and it's big and it's beautiful. And when we actually follow him in that and are faithful with it, you know, there's a glory in it. But there's some pretty harsh implications for when, at least in his standards, when we violate that, you know, especially when it takes advantage of, you know, someone else. So I don't know, just something I've been sitting in and thinking about as we endeavor to lead, to guide young, impressionable people. I think that there's a lot of grace. I thank God for the gospel and our failures in that. But God's called us to a very, very high task, and he cares a lot about how we're forming others. You know, so I've been primarily thinking about that in terms of my own teenagers, my kids, but also other people that I lead in the church in my role. I want to be faithful in that.
That's good. Mine.
Yeah. How
is
about you?
tacked right
What you been reading?
Tacked right onto that. We're at the end of Joshua, moving into Judges, and the splitting up of the land, which is about as dry as toast. But to the Israelites, and it even says that at the end of Joshua, this is God fulfilling every single one of his promises. And Joshua says, yeah, God's fulfilled every single one of his promises. And even what I thought was interesting this time around was like Caleb is still kicking around and
Yes.
like
Yeah.
spunky and like, hey, I'm still doing good, you know, and God fulfilled his promise
I
to
love
Caleb.
Caleb. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love Caleb.
And he fulfilled his promise to Joshua, and he fulfilled his promises to Zelophehad's daughters, and all these like individual people, even years prior, God was faithful and all these things. And so as in this moment where it's like, okay, God is bringing them into the promised land, and this is it. This is the fulfillment of everything that he's promised. He was faithful in it all, even like in these little moments. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what stuck out to me
Yes.
as we move into the horrific book of Judges.
I remember reading Judges with my kids when they were really little,
Yeah.
asking my wife, "Do we censor some of this or do we just read it?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"Just read it." Like, okay.
We're getting a lot of questions right now about Pharaoh and why God turned the river red, what happened. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. Some of
Well,
the Bible's rated R, it seems like.
it is. Yeah.
Don't shy away from it with your kids. They can handle it.
There you go. Well, thank you guys again so much for jumping in. I don't know if you can tell, but Travis and I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. So if you would like to engage, if this is all new stuff to you and you're like, man, I just love to pick these guys' brains a little bit more, or pick somebody else's brain, we are on Discord currently, and that's theworshipserver.com/Discord. It'll also be in the show notes. We'd love to have you jump in on this conversation. We're not looking to build audience, we're looking to build community. So we'd
Yes.
love to see you
Yeah.
guys there. And with all that, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.